Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today. I am so excited for today's session. My name is Barrett Johannesson, and I will be your host today. We have Tony Ruth as our presenter, and Tony is going to give you a little spiel on what to expect with iFormBuilder in the remaining of 2016, but also go through what we've added to the platform thus far. So upcoming events. So we have our Form Builder certification. For those of you who haven't heard of Form Builder certification, this is a 2 4-hour course where it's devoted to making sure that you and other members of your team are getting the most out of iFormBuilder. Our next session is in October, and so I'd urge you to go in and sign up if that's something that you're interested in. And on that note, Tony, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Barrett, for the great intro and to set the stage for what we're going to walk through today. This is actually really fun for me. You know, it's a lot of hard work that's kind of done in isolation in a sense. And this webinar gives us a chance to kind of share with you as the audience what we're doing, what we have done in case you've missed something, and also give you a glimpse as to what the future holds. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Ruth. I've been with Zerion Software now for a little over 6 years. I lead the product development team and work with about 7 developers day to day, working on various different softwares and projects. And so the agenda for today is to basically take a look at what 2016 has brought so far, what we're going to be working on for the last half of the year, and then also show some demonstrations and kind of walk through some of the stuff that we already have produced, answer any questions that may come up in the meantime, and also share a little bit about how you as the audience and clients of ours play a huge role in the product development cycle. We're going to finish up with a little bit of Q&A at the end. And as always, Barrett, if there are any questions while I'm walking through this, just feel free to just interrupt me, and we'll take those questions.
No problem, Tony. Happy to interrupt.
All right. Well, thanks. So let's go ahead and just move into the review. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Basically, just for any of you who have missed it or for those who are new, just want to give you a little bit of insight as to what we have completed so far. And the very first bullet point here, I think, is really important. Nobody has actually really seen this just yet, but we have been quietly working on the foundation for the next 10 years of Zerion. And this really encompasses a lot. The main thing that this wraps up is a centralized login for all the new software that we will be producing. So rather than have many different softwares and everybody having separate logins for all those different softwares, we've been working really hard at building a centralized login and access management system, basically to just gear up for the future development that's coming. As related to iFormBuilder, those of you who are familiar, there's a concept called post data. We introduced an option that actually allows the labels to be sent out in the post request rather than the raw data. We found that those who were basically sending data outside of iForm were typically trying to display that either in a PDF or maybe a worksheet or some other view. And so while the raw data is not bad, the pretty data or the labels is a little bit nicer to look at. So if you haven't seen it, there's an option within the console under the post data section where you can just check a box to post the labels out rather than the raw data values. Also with the iFormBuilder platform, we've introduced a dynamic email concept. This is actually a topic that's been on the community forums for a while, and we were able to implement this early in the year. Effectively, it allows you to select a field inside of your form that will be used for the email subject. This allows you to get very creative in the sense that you could populate the field which is being used for the subject using Smart Control. So let's say you're filling out some data inside your form, and you actually want to take 3 values and kind of combine them together to make the subject. You have the ability to do that, and that's found under the email alert section in the Form Builder console. On the client side, we introduced a new feature which effectively captures and stores the metadata. So this would be your latitude, your longitude, date, time, camera settings in terms of the flash being on, flash not being on, all those little details are now actually stored with the image itself. So basically, if you're uploading media to the iFormBuilder cloud, you can now take a look at these pictures using several different utilities and see a little bit more detail about that specific picture. We've captured metadata with the records forever, but this now introduces another layer of metadata specifically for those images.
And Tony, can I interrupt here quickly?
You absolutely can.
So just for those folks who are getting pretty excited about some of this and want to learn more about it, in the PDF that we share with you later on, everything on this list that we have a Customer Success Center article for, I will include the link, so you'll be able to look at those from our Customer Success Center. And Tony, there is a question about the post data with the labels and how that will impact if there's localization added to that form.
Great question. And so basically this isn't leveraging localization. This is just leveraging the native design of the form itself. So if you're looking at the form builder, however the labels are displayed there is what would be posted across.
Would there be any way to include any of the localization, or would that need some additional implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be done. We have not gotten that far just yet. I know there's a number of requests that wrap around localization and reusing the information there in other places such as reports or displays. So lots of good ideas cooking on that front. At this point, we are not leveraging localizations outside of the iOS or the Android client.
All right, Tony, so that's it for now, except actually there was one more about the image metadata, and if there is a way to get that metadata into your reports, or if that's something that could come down the road as well.
Well, the way that this works is that the information is actually stored with the image itself. So there are various tools out there that can extract this information. It's not something that we have taken upon ourselves to basically provide a tool which extracts the information. So I guess the short answer is that the information is there and it could be extracted and placed into a report. It's not something that we offer directly. We do capture the information, save it with the photo, but outside of that, you're kind of on your own to extract and display if need be.
All right, well that's it for now, Tony, so thank you.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Feel free to interrupt at any time.
Will do.
So jumping back into the list of things that we have worked on so far, it brings us to Dataflow Automation. And so for a long time, we focused on the data collection side. That's great, but there's always a what's next step. And so for the last year and a half or so, we've been working on a new piece of software which allows information to be transformed, to be filtered, to be rearranged, and kind of pushed off to other systems. In addition to doing all those transformation routines on the data, we also store this information. And so this kind of brings us into what's next section. So I'll kind of leave it there for right now, but we have produced a new piece of software which is basically complementary to iFormBuilder and will help you transform and push your data through different workflows. The next big piece, which actually rolled out the door just last week, was the drawing element for the Android iForm app. Long time coming. I know there's several of you that are probably clapping your hands and saying, well, it's about damn time. But I can let you know that it's now available. So if you haven't seen the update yet, go visit Google Play, download the latest version of iForm off the store, and you'll now have the ability to use the drawing element on Android. We've also been working on a sandbox environment, and so this is actually a tool that we've used internally now for about 2.5 years, and have found this so useful that we decided it needed to be kind of publicized and pushed out the door for customers as well. And the intent here is to allow you to basically make a copy of of your environment or a slice of your environment and back it up somewhere safe. This is useful for two reasons. One being new development. So you have a form that exists in the field and you want to make some significant changes, but not impact the team that's out there working. Sandbox environment allows you to back up the current state of the form, even all the data that goes with it in the case that you have lookup tables and other dependencies, and then start making modifications in isolation. The other primary use case for this is in the sense where somebody's maybe removed a form or removed some data. The Sandbox environment will actually allow you to go back in time. So let's say somebody calls and said, "Hey Tony, I made a mistake. I deleted this form and it wiped out this information." I'm able to go into my Sandbox environment and say, "Okay, well, give me the data for this particular profile or the entire account from yesterday," and so I can restore that back into a safe place. Either extract that information, or if need be, that can be used as a basis to restore that data back into the active account. And last but not least is the Form Builder 2.0. So those of you who've been paying attention for a little while now know that we've been working on this for about 1 year, maybe a little longer. And so Form Builder 2.0 made its debut this year. It's still in active development. It's not 100% done, but very usable, and we've gotten lots of great feedback from those who've had early access and have reached out and kind of given us feedback on that. So those are the main things I wanted to just touch on in the review, and we're going to dive into the Form Builder details a little bit later. So Barrett, sounds like there might be some questions.
Yes, there is a question. One is about the Sandbox environment, and if someone wanted to have access to that, how would they be able to do that?
That's a great question. So the best thing to do would be to chat with your account manager. And if you don't have an account manager, you can just contact sales directly. They'll be able to give you kind of the high-level overview of what's included and the price points and all those fun details. So I would say start there, and if there's any other more specific questions, we could always address those as well.
Okay, wonderful. And as Tony mentioned, if you're not sure about who your account manager is, then feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we'll send you the email from the webinar, and you can always respond to that too. Another question, Tony, about the Sandbox is, does it automatically back up, or do you have to configure it to do a regular backup, or how does that the backup functionality work?
Great question. And so the backups, or the Sandbox environment, if you will, is done on demand. So basically, the way that it works is you'll have, let's say, 3 spaces available that you can restore data into. So in the event that you want to back something up to start working on a new form, you would actually go into your Sandbox environment and say, "Give me the live data for my account." Go ahead and type in some details and click go. Depending on how big your account is, it can take 1 to 2 minutes, maybe up to 15 minutes if you've been around for a number of years and have thousands of profiles in your database. So basically, this is on request. We back up the system constantly, so getting historic data is available to you for a certain time period. I believe it's 3 weeks, perhaps 2. But basically, the nature of the Sandbox is that as a user, you go in and request either live data or historic data. And then when the process is finished, you're able to get into that environment and do what you need to do. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And just to be clear, someone does have to have a dedicated database to be able to have a backup or Sandbox environment?
That is correct.
And another question is, can they request in advance for a Sandbox?
I'm sorry?
So one question is, can they request to have the Sandbox environment now, or is that something that they should request to have access to it for the future?
So yeah, basically you'll need to work with either the account manager or the sales team to first, purchase that option, and then from there we can work on the setup.
Perfect. And the last thing that I have, Tony, is you forgot to mention one of my favorite releases that we have for the Android about including the description.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of those things that got included with the drawing element release, but there were a few little things that we cleaned up and just added with the drawing element, one being the description for the elements themselves. So this kind of goes into a broader objective, which is to try to equalize the Android and iOS functionality. For those of you who work on both platforms, you know that there is a gap between the two. And so we've been working really hard the beginning of this year, and we will continue to work hard through the end of this year to really close that gap and try to equalize those features. So no matter what device you deploy in the field, the experience is the same, no matter if it's on iOS or Android.
Just to go back on the Sandbox, just in a nutshell for everyone who's listening, if you're interested in having access to the Sandbox, contact your account manager, as well as the Sandbox is developed so that it's a real-time backup of the data that you can go in and request and get at least up to the 2 to 3 weeks in the past. So Tony, with that, I think we are ready for you to continue.
Excellent. So that wraps up the first half of the year. Now I want to spend a little bit of time looking into the future. And so the future, or the next 5 months, if you will bring the following items to the Zerion software world. So for a long time, we've been hearing, hey, it's great that you let me collect my data. How do I visualize this in iForm? And for those of you who are familiar, there's some very simple displays or outputs that we provide. We realize that that's not enough. And for forever now, you've been finding other software providers or other solutions to take your iForm data and then display that, crunch it, just build a dashboard, all those different things that you need to do in order to really maximize the use of your data. So we're spending significant time and energy bringing this into the Zerion software world so that you don't have to leave the Zerion ecosystem. So you can expect dashboard and reports coming in the next few months here. And for those of you who are really interested and kind of want to take an early look, reach out to either myself, Barrett, or somebody else that you work with on the Zerion team, and I'm sure they'll be able to tell you a little bit more. Moving on, we have iOS 10, which is coming down the pipe really quickly. So they're on the 4th beta right now. We will be looking into some performance upgrades as well as trying to maximize some of the new features available in iOS 10. So you can keep your eyes peeled for updates coming in about the next month or so. Public release is typically the 2nd week of September, and so we'll be iOS 10 build then. Continuing with the previous 6 months, we're also going to continue investing in Android feature equality. Just a little glimpse into the next maybe month or so. We have some upgrades coming for the Manatee scanning engine, as well as introducing the copy record function. So that's also a big time saver, I know, for groups out there that are kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So look for the Manatee upgrade, look for copy record, as well as a new hardware integration to the Android platform, which is the temperature probe and IR scanning devices from ETI. For those of you who aren't familiar, ETI is a company based in the UK that produces infrared and probe type temperature readers. So if you need to read surface temperature or internal temperature, these devices connect over Bluetooth and are able to feed those readings back into your form. We're also going to be releasing a new application. Those of you who've worked with iPads for a while know that there is a collection side and then a manage side on the iOS platform. And so we took a slightly different approach on Android. Rather than building the manage functionality into the existing iForm app, we've actually decided that the functionality is big enough and important enough that we're going to build a separate application. So you can look for a new application coming out in the next month and a half or so, which will allow you to access your data and basically display it in a really simple table view, do your sorting, your filtering, and show hide, all those kind of core functions that you need in order to really use your data in the field. And just a little bit more on why we decided to do a second app. There's a way that you can switch between two applications. And so the intent, for those of you who've ever used Facebook and Facebook's Messenger app, you can see that they've done a really tight integration between those two applications. So as you're browsing your newsfeed and maybe a message pops up, you're able to quickly kind of bounce between those two applications. And we thought there was a similar need for the data collection as well as the data view to basically exist in two different apps. So that way, if you're working actively on collecting data and you need to go reference something, you can easily switch. And we're working on building a deeper integration between those two applications as well. Rather than on the iOS side, you have to kind of back out of your current data collection process, flip to the manage side of the application, and then kind of drill back down into it. So from a user experience standpoint, it wasn't ideal, and that was the reason to separate the manage app in Android. The next point here is lookup updates. So those of you who've been paying attention to the community forums and maybe have seen some marketing emails come out, we did a Feature Frenzy event over the last month and a half here, and we have a winner, which is lookup table upgrades. So to elaborate on what that means, Basically, you have a lookup table which stores some information. Users were expected to key in the precise value. Let's just use social security number for an example. So you had to key in the precise social security number in order to return information about that person, which is okay. But at the end of the day, we're so reliant on computers and technology now. There's a good chance we're not going to keep that precise value in our head. And so wouldn't it be great if we can actually see a list of all the available options and then pick one? That's going to reduce the risk for error. It's going to make sure that users have a better experience in the field when trying to find the value that they want to return. So this is basically going to take the lookup functionality that you're used to today and present the values that are available to be searched in a list display.
So Tony, can I interrupt quickly?
Of course.
So with the lookup, let's say someone adds a brand new record to that database. Are you saying that that new record, that value that was unique and used to tie the database form to the other form together is automatically going to be added to an option list?
Well, the short answer is yes. So basically, the information syncs down to the device just like it will today. Rather than like keying in a value into a text field, when you go to start keying in your value or basically enter your search criteria, rather than getting an empty text field to key something into, you'll have a list of options displayed to you. Okay. So think of the lookup data just getting reused and displayed to the end user in a list format.
Awesome. That clears that up. And then the other question is about the Manage app. So folks are used to, those individuals who are using iOS devices are used to having the only iPads access the Manage. On Androids, is it only going to be on the Android tablets, or are smaller devices going to be able to use the Manage app as well?
We haven't put any hard restrictions in. At the end of the day, it comes down to usability. So I've looked at this on tablets, I've looked at this on phones. The phone is really difficult to use. It just comes down to screen real estate and the way that the interface is set up. So we're not 100% certain if we're going to block phones again, just like we did on iOS. But at the end of the day, we do want to maximize user experience, and it may come down to not allowing this to run on phones. We're still undecided at this point, so I think once we get some feedback from our alpha team who's going to take an early look at this for us, we'll have a better idea as which direction we want to go.
Well, thank you, Tony. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, wonderful. So the last two bullet points I think are rather important. So more granular permissions throughout. And what I mean by this is if you look at iFormBuilder today, it's basically broken up into four main roles. So you have your basic user, which is only able to either collect data or view data based on the company admin assigning rights to them for specific forms. And then you have your form builder role, which is allowed to basically go in and build new forms. They cannot see or edit any other forms that they did not build. And then you have your company admin and your server admin. So out of those four roles, they're okay. They allow things to happen, but we over time realize that there is a big demand to actually break this down and make this far more granular. So for example, you may say that Tony should be allowed to view these 5 forms. He should be allowed to update 7 more, and he should be allowed to only view data where there are records that he created. That's something that we didn't set ourselves up to handle in the early days, and so going back to the foundation for the next 10 years, this is kind of wrapped up in that, so that basically whatever you can think of or dream of in terms of permission structure should be able to be handled. The last bullet point here is all about a common interface. So as we produce more software on the client side and the server side, we want to make sure that there's a consistent look and feel, as well as common buttons throughout. That way, the learning curve is less steep, and for those who have been so used to iFormBuilder and may want to step into Dataflow Automation, reports, and all these other things that we're going to be producing, it should be a more seamless transition with keeping a common interface in place. So that kind of wraps up where we're going in the next 5 months here. And Barrett, are there any other questions before I step into the new form builder?
Yes, there is. There's a question about geo-tracing. This individual is wondering if they can expect geo-tracing ability anytime soon.
Can somebody elaborate on what geo-tracing means?
I'm not sure exactly what they mean, so we'll wait to get their response, and then I'll bother you again once I hear back from them.
Okay, well, how about we just do a quick Google search?
Oh, there we go. Ability to trace the anchorage of a farm.
Acreage of a farm. I think that there's probably ways that could be done. In terms of drawing this, it's not something that we're going to do directly, at least not right now. So maybe what we can do is just get the contact information of whoever asked the question, and we can follow up with them in a little bit more detail after the call.
Will do. And then Tony, there's another question about the reports. It says, will the reports / the dashboards be native to iFormBuilder, or will they use another tool?
We're looking at basically acquiring software to deal with reporting for us. At the end of the day, we're not 100% sure where this will take us over the next 10 years. So I guess the answer to that question is we are going to leverage other technology, just like we leverage other technology for barcode scanning. That may not be the end game, but at the end of the day, we do want to bring this under our roof and make sure that for those folks who do need to display their data, that there's the ability to do so within the Zerion ecosystem.
Perfect. All right, Tony, that's it for now.
Wonderful. So that takes us into a really big development. This is like 1+ years in the making, long overdue, and basically this is rewriting the form builder. So what I'm going to do here is actually just kind of walk you through a scenario, and then we're going to see a video demo basically of the two interfaces, the old and the new, side by side, just to kind of talk through some of the differences and why we did what we did. So I'll go ahead and just throw this up here. Basically, I just tried to come up with a list of steps that somebody would have to perform. These are not uncommon steps that your form builders are doing every single day. So this really is creating a new list and then assigning this list to a form, or sorry, an element within a form, moving some elements around within that form, adding some JavaScript functions, and then creating a new form altogether with the following design that you can see below here. So not a lot of steps, but you're going to see that there's a pretty significant difference between the old interface and the new interface. So basically, at this point, I want to slide over to the screen here. Just to reiterate, you're going to have the old builder on the right and the new builder on the left. And so what I want to do is just kind of play this video. I did both of these routines myself, so I'm very familiar with what the routine needed to be. And actually, in the old builder's defense, I'm far more familiar with where the elements and the buttons were. So I'm a bit more proficient in the old interface. So again, the very first task was actually to add a new option list. On the left, you can see I'm done. But on the old interface, what you had to do is first find a form which had an option list element to even get into the option list manager and then create the list. So on the right-hand side, you can see I'm still basically trying to get myself to the point of creating a new list. And on the left-hand side, I'm actually already assigning the list that I created and moving on to the next step. I'm not going to let this whole video play out. It's about 7 minutes entirety to get through the old builder's routine. But I do just kind of want to show how much difference there is between these two. So at this point, I'm on to step 3, which is to add the page level JavaScript function in the new builder. And I'm still on step 2 at this point, which is basically assigning the list that I created to a new select widget on the right-hand side. It's going to be tough to see just because of the side-by-side comparison, but on the new builder, there's actually syntax highlighting. And one of the things it helped me with is I had a typo. And so because the colors didn't match up, I was able to quickly see that and add the semicolon that I had missed originally. And it was tough to see, but as you can see me painfully going through the drag and drop process on the right-hand side, to rearrange these fields, we're able to actually cut and paste many fields in the new interface. So if you're in the position where you have to either move 3 fields to the top of the form or somewhere in the middle, you don't have to do that one at a time with drag and drop. You can actually use the new interface to cut all 3 elements and then select where you'd like to paste them below. So it's about 4 clicks rather than 4 drag and drop exercises. So just to kind of speed through this a little bit, there's not much to see because there's a lot of typing, but the whole video is about 7.5 minutes, and if I jump to around 4 minutes, I think right about here, you're going to see I'm on the last 2 steps of the exercise on the new builder, while I'm still struggling pretty heavily on the old interface. And we're going to step through and show you a little bit more detail about the new interface after this video presentation is finished. But I think it's really helpful just to see from the same set of tasks, even from the same person on the same computer, I was able to work through all those tasks in basically about half the time. So I'm done. You can see that 4 minutes, 26 seconds, and there's 3:18 to go until I finish up on the right-hand side here. And again, this is not being as familiar with the interface on the left and knowing the interface on the right extremely well. The other thing I want to point out is that the number of clicks that it takes to perform this exercise in the old interface was around 300. I think it was like 305 or something like that, versus the new interface, we're down to 82. So the amount of time you spend interacting with your mouse or your trackpad and clicking on the screen is dramatically reduced, as well as the time it takes to actually go through these common exercises. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just slide back to the presentation, and Barrett, I'll ask you if there's any questions before we move on.
Hi, Tony. Yes, there are. One question is about the option list and how the key values are generated. In the last release of the option list, the key values that were created when someone created an option list weren't necessarily database friendly. This has been updated, correct?
Are you talking about the new interface?
Yeah, on the new interface.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, I thought so as well, but I just wanted to double check with you on that one.
Okay.
The next question is about the generation of new option lists. In our classic version of the form builder, you were able to create a new option list when you're building out your form, which had it was a great asset to your form building process because you were able to do everything all in one location when you're in that first creation process. With this, with the new form builder, Form Builder 2.0, we separated it so that it's easier to update option lists. But when you're creating that first form and you want to create the option list to go with that, you actually have to open up another window and go into that window to create that option list. And it's not very smooth of a process. Is this something that they're looking for in the future to kind of make it a little bit easier, or do you know any of the plans for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, with new designs and strategies comes new, new behaviors that we have to try to, learn and adopt. So I think, and I can appreciate this because I've worked in the old builder for about 6 years now. There is no intent to basically bury the option list as it was in the classic form builder. And the reason for not doing so is because it really was buried. In order to get to that, you're making about 7 clicks just to get yourself into the option list window. And so I would make the argument that actually, creating a separate tab and even putting your form builder and your option list tab side by side allows you to flip between those two. And it also comes back with, kind of a building strategy. So one of the building strategies that I've always employed is to build my list first. Because at the end of the day, if you build all your elements and then you have to build your list and add your content, in the old interface you were building them and then having to assign. So for me, I would prefer to actually build all the lists that I need for the form, and then as I'm putting the form together, I can just link those lists to the appropriate element. So I hope that answers the question. There's not an intent now to basically put the option list functionality back where it was, rather to keep it separate and to kind of share these new best practices or newer ways of building.
And Tony, if people have questions or comments about the new form builder, will you mind sharing with them where they should actually put that information?
Yeah, absolutely. We can get some notes out at the end of this, and we can make sure that folks know where to log that feedback and suggestions.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, no worries. So going past the video demo, it's just again walking through the you know, the interface changes here. And Barrett, am I missing one? No. Okay. So yeah, when you look at this this form menu here, first thing you're going to notice at the top is a search bar. So for those of you who've worked with maybe more than a dozen or so forms in your account, this is huge. You know, trying to find that one form that you want to work on in a list of several hundred or 1,000 was painful at best in the old interface. And so now there's no more searching and trying to scroll through the long list. You know, you just key in a search for what you're looking for. Saves a lot of time when you're dealing with a big list of forms. You also notice too at the top below the search bar, there's a number of different properties that can be selected. You know, so in the old interface, we were simply just displaying the form name, and that was it. Now, if you wanted to see who modified the form last or when it was created, you're able to expose that different information in the main form list. So big change there. Well, I shouldn't say big change, but subtle change there, but big impact in terms of what it can do for you in terms of efficiency. Moving on to the actual builder interface, we wanted to kind of separate the, you know, the device view, the input fields, as well as the input properties. And again, this goes back to the philosophy that we don't want you touching the screen or touching the mouse pad as frequently as you had to in the old interface. So the act of adding a new, let's just say, social security element on the old interface required you to say, add new input, go to the input properties, select the input type, and then click save. Versus in the new interface, you find the input property style that you want, and just click it. And so it's basically taking you know, 3 different actions and combining them into one. This is focused all on the building interface. So as you're building new forms, you know, this is the primary layout where you have the 3 different panes. If you look in the top left-hand corner here, there's actually 2 different options, which brings back more of the kind of classic layout that you're most used to. And then if you are not so much in the building phase, but you're in the editing phase, we actually designed this table view. And so internally, we found that you know, this table view is very helpful when editing, especially if you're trying to look at some logic conditions. So here you can see that we've actually taken advantage of these different properties. And in addition to label name and data type, we've exposed the dynamic value and the condition value. So it lets us quickly kind of scroll through and see what type of logic we have in place. Maybe there's an issue that's been reported to us from the field. And rather than tabbing down through each individual element on the device view, we're able to see the dynamic value and condition value for basically everything, all laid out in this table here. So again, it's really trying to match the interface to the task at hand. So this is primarily done for editing existing, versus this is primarily done for building out new forms. So Barrett, are there any questions at this point?
So one thing I just want to add, Tony, for those of you who are becoming more familiar with the Form Builder 2.0, we have added tooltips. So once you're in the Form Builder tool 2.0, if you hover over some of the different icons, most of the icons, you should be able to get a description on what you can do with those icons. And another thing that I wanted to mention, or another question that came in, Tony, is someone says, I think it would be great for the parent and subforms could be viewed like a folder structure in the form builder. You'd be able to clearly see what forms are related, and you can expand or contract as required to save screen size. But essentially, you're going to be able to see the form workflow. Is that something that's in the plans currently?
It's not in the plans currently. It's come to the surface, I think, several times in the past. We've discussed that. I think at the end of the day, we are still not convinced that this should be in the builder. The functionality and being able to see that is great, but we want to make sure that the interfaces we design are purposeful, and we don't basically compromise. So if you're really trying to see the relationship of your form I would actually extend that and to say it's not just the forms, but it's the option list, it's all the other dependencies that go with it. And so rather than trying to squeeze that into like the main form menu interface that we have here, there's been some talks about actually designing a totally separate screen to, to display those relationships, if you will.
Great. Thank you, Tony. I think that would be really helpful too,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Okay, great.
And I do want to mention to everybody that if you go into the chat section of the GoToWebinar control panel, I did put a link for if you have any comments about the Form Builder 2.0, you can go in there into our community forum and post them there so others can participate in that as well.
Okay, so just a quick recap. These are all the current enhancements that have been done. So one thing I didn't mention is that now the Form Builder is tablet friendly. It's really not usable on a phone, but I have done some work on my iPad. Probably any screen size about the size of an iPad is actually going to work really well. So for those of you who need to make quick edits in the field, or want to update a label or description, you're now able to do that on a mobile device. So I think that's a huge win, even though we don't really talk about it a lot. And we did drop Adobe Flash, which is becoming a bigger security concern day by day. All these other things we've touched on, so this is just a quick recap of where things currently are, as well as what we're working on in the short term. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next piece. And so I want to just show off the Android Manage app just very briefly. This is still active development. We're targeting a version 1 release at the end of this month, early September. And so let's just not wait any longer and jump right into that. And I played a little bit. So really simple interface. This is not designed for offline, so everything you do does require an active connection. You'll see that basically once you log in, there's an interface similar to what you see on the iOS platform, a search bar at the top, a list of all the forms that I have access to, as well as the last time that the data was modified on these. So I just kind of wanted to scroll down through just to show you that if you do have more forms on the server that didn't load the very first time, you're able to scroll and it will load more of these forms as you see in that little message. I actually want to show off search functionality, so I look for a form called disaster assessment. And we're going to go ahead and load the data for that. So just to point out, there's a few things that we still haven't accomplished yet, which is actually size constraints. So you see this is really tall right now. That will be taken care of in the next couple weeks here. But you'll notice it's similar to what you see on iOS, just a very basic table layout. We have our filter functionality here, so I can go in and basically filter on any of the fields available. In this case, I'm going to search for the name Tony and go ahead and hit OK. So this reloads all the data, and you can see anything that includes the name Tony in the full name field. I guess one thing to point out here is that this is actually designed to talk to the iForm APIs, which are public for anybody to use. So the really interesting thing is that this application is actually not calling any special private functions. Really anybody with ambition or the time could build this or build something similar to this. So for those of you looking at this saying, that's simple, it's meant to be simple. We wanted to really accomplish one thing, which is to bring the data that's on the server down to a mobile-friendly view, give you the similar functionality that you're used to on iOS. So if anybody's interested in getting early access to this, Barrett and I will have more information after the webinar. So just stay tuned and hold on a little bit, and we'll talk to you a little bit afterwards. So that's all I had for the the Manage application. I do want to switch over and do a really short demo quick on the drawing widget. So if you bear with me for just 1 second. All right, so you should be able to see my Android device here on the screen, and so I'm just going to jump in real quick. We're running short on time, so this will go quickly. You're going to notice that the interface is laid out very similar to iOS. Down here, you have the basically camera action / library action to choose a photo as your backdrop. If we touch on the second icon there, it's going to bring up our color selection wheel. So for any text that we're going to add, we can set the size, we can set the color, and as well as the darkness level. There's a way to add text to this. So we weren't able to actually implement drag and drop functionality just like iOS. However, we found a nice middle ground that allows you to position the text in one of 5 quadrants. So you can see these options here. Basically, I'll choose the top left, and then it's going to drop the text Tony up in the top left there. We are planning to include drag and drop at a later time, but we felt that this was usable, and we didn't want to hold it back any longer, just due to that. In addition to the text there, we also have an eraser. So if I wasn't happy with the Tony that I added there, I can simply just erase it. Of course, I jumped over the very first one, and since I only have a front-facing camera, you guys all get to see my smiling face. So here I am. And then, we can do all sorts of fun things like, draw horns on me, or, draw glasses around me, and all sorts of other interesting things. So for those of you who've been missing this, it is available. Make sure you go grab the Android update offline and get some good use of it. With that, I'm going to transition back to the presentation because we don't have a whole lot of time here, and there's just a few more things that I want to talk about before we answer some final questions. So I mentioned Dataflow Automation, and for those of you who haven't seen this or seen the marketing material around it, it's really the next step after iFormBuilder. So iFormBuilder and iForm have been great at allowing you to go and grab data from the field and bring it back to the online world. From there, it really kind of needs to go through maybe 1 to 2 other processes. Usually there's a transformation process. You want to filter the data down, organize it in a way that allows the business stakeholders to actually make decisions on the data that came from the field. So Dataflow Automation is our answer to that. And here you can see just a snapshot of the interface. This is a webhook that allows iForm data to get pushed into this environment. And then on the second icon, you see what we refer to as a record set. So this is storing all the information that comes in, as well as passing it on to a next step, which is to simply just turn this into a PDF report. And so I'm able to actually manipulate the data. I can put styling and all sorts of fun additions inside of my template so that the data collected from the field can look a heck of a lot different in the final PDF report than it did in the form itself. So stay tuned. There's lots more coming on this front, but did want to just shed some light on it and just make those folks aware that we are investing in this. The other thing that we're investing in heavily, and this is the foundation I was talking about for the next 10 years, is all about identity management. So as we produce these new things like Dataflow Automation and reports and whatever the future may hold, we want to make sure that you don't have to maintain 10 different logins to get into all these systems, as well as permissions that we talked about earlier. Making permissions more granular all falls back to access and identity management. So Calvin has spent the last 6 to 7 months working really hard on this. It's at a point now for it's providing service to the Dataflow Automation, as well as reports and a couple other things that we're working on. And so while this doesn't seem like a lot, and there's not much on the screen, know that it's very important, and it will make sure that in the future you only have to remember 1 login for the Zerion software ecosystem. So with that, I want to just slide into the last screen here, and you can expect this to become your home for Zerion over the next 10 years. Basically, as we build out more services and features and do different things, there will be a single landing page or a single home screen for you to visit. And this is just going to help you stay organized. That way you don't have to remember 20 different logins or different application websites. You're able to come to Zerion, log in, and then access all the different tools that you may need. At this point, we have Dataflow Automation and the identity and access management, but this will fill up rather quickly. So with that, I want to just wrap up with how important customers are in our product development lifecycle. So for those of you paying attention, we just finished up Feature Frenzy. That's where the Smart Table Search upgrade comes from. Additionally, we do have a community forum that's that's growing every day. There's a few different categories out there that are focused on feature additions. I would encourage you to go check the community out and see what's see what's being asked of the community, what features we've already implemented. And if there's an idea like the ideas that came up today during the conversation, make sure to get them logged there. There's a good chance that you're not alone, and by gaining more support behind those ideas, it makes it really hard for us to ignore that, and we want to put time and energy into making everybody happy. So in addition to us looking forward and trying to predict what the future holds in technology, we also pay attention very closely to what the community needs are and try to incorporate those into releases as well. So Barrett, I think at this point I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap things up, and you can kind of walk through these last two slides. What do you think?
Okay, so here at the end, I always talk about the different support options we have available within Zerion. Just want to make sure that you are aware of these outlets so that you are getting the most out of the platform. We do have an awesome customer success center where you're able to go in and chat with our agents. We have some great agents on there, very, very friendly, I promise. We have our community forum, which, as Tony mentioned, that's where we urge you to go in and vote and participate in discussions, but also introduce yourself to the community. We have a new forum where it's actually called something like along the lines of introduce yourself, so that people get to know who's really in the iFormBuilder and Zerion software community to discuss projects and to learn from each other. We really want to make this into a communication between different customers and learning from each other. And all of these are links, so when you get the PDF, you'll be able to go in and see these different pages. Just to close here, I want to mention that in the next 48 hours, you will receive an email with the recording from today's session. It'll also include this PDF, and on the web page that we're going to connect, you'll be able to sign up to be a Android Manage App beta tester if you're interested in doing that. And if you are interested, we'll walk you through what the steps look like and what you can anticipate for being a beta tester. And with that, Tony, do you have any other things you'd like to add? We do have a couple questions.
Yeah, just before we jump into the questions, so I get the pleasure of sitting up here and chatting with everybody, but there's a huge there's a really important team that sits behind me, and I just want to make sure that that they're thanked publicly, because there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into the things that I got to show today. So all of this is not possible without Calvin, Seth, Keith, Antonio, Sven, Amol, Woody, Tan, Yun Hong, and now Zoe. So for those of you who've listened in on this before, there hasn't been that many thank yous that I've mentioned in the past, and our team is growing quickly. And what that translates into is that we're able to push bigger updates out more frequently and really satisfy the needs of the community. So thanks to everybody on the development team.
And thank you, Tony.
Yeah, no worries. Ready for questions.
So here are some questions that are coming in. One is, when will the Form Builder 2.0 be fully rolled out? Are some customers already using this, or is it still being developed?
So to answer that question, fully rolled out is something that it's probably really hard to say, because I can tell you that there will be feature enhancements and requests coming in probably for the next 2 to 5 years. So it is being used today. I know there's a number of folks that I have spoken with directly that have completely switched over. They don't even look at the old link anymore and are strictly building in the new interface.
And Tony, I don't know, did you mention that that people can access this when they log into their Form Builder account?
Oh yeah. So for those of you, basically who haven't seen it, there is another link under the the Forms menu, and so you'll be able to access that. If you can't see it, reach out and let us know. There's a chance that your account owner has actually disabled the early access functionality. It's totally up to them. So if you don't see it, reach out to your account owner, let us know. There's a chance that they've actually turned that off. But it is available. Everybody who has an iFormBuilder account can use it. And I do know there are some folks that are specifically using this and not the old interface anymore.
There is one more question, and it's just about managing forms and creating forms. Currently, right now, on mobile devices, you're not able to assign forms unless you go under Safari. Is there any thoughts and development or anything like that for planning on allowing people, or us creating an app where people can open up that app on the mobile device to do some of that management?
I would say the answer to that question is actually we want to completely rebuild the admin interface that you're used to that is completely geared toward desktop browsers. And so there's a push to basically deconstruct that entire interface and rebuild it in a mobile-friendly format. So I would say stay tuned for more updates on that coming maybe towards the end of the year. It's not an easy undergoing, which is why we're going to do it. We don't like to do easy things. Long answer shortened up. You can expect that to happen. Just don't hold your breath for the next 2 months.
All right. Well, with that, Tony, I really do want to thank you for taking time and diving into all of this. I know I always enjoy hosting this session, and I know customers really appreciate it. And to all our customers and users, you guys are awesome. Keep doing awesome things, and please let us know where we can make you even more successful. And with that, have a great day, everybody.